evening. It's Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. It's a regular meeting of the Planning Commission. And tonight we have one agenda item, deliberations and possible action for Capitol Hill PUD remand, City File PDT 17-1. And I think, depending on the timing, it sounds like there's some interest in getting a little update from staff and if there's Planning Commission has some news, any news to report. So I'll add agenda item B potentially, but I'll check in with you before we move to that. So before we move to deliberation, the discussion, staff has some additional information, comments, response.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. There was a couple of questions raised by Commissioner Baker, and I just wanted to clarify for the record. There was one question about what the final vote was at the Planning Commission stage when the appeal first came through, and that was actually a 4-1 vote in favor of the final order at that time. There was two other issues that were brought up, and one was about on-site impacts on the property, and that there was no rebuttal to the things that had been said by the opponents, or by, I guess, Gunnar, who had raised issues in his testimony. And I wanted to point to, what I did was I tried to point to some things during the meeting that were in letter by the applicant's attorney, which I was reminded is actually argument, not evidence in that sense. But in his arguments, he points to, when it comes to on-site soil movement and the issue with the barn that was raised, that back in March 21 of 2018, there was a submission by the applicant, and included in that in attachments was a geotech rebuttal dated 3/2018 by Branch Engineering, which discussed soil creep, and it talked about the issues of soil creep, which is the issue that was brought up about the barn later, and that modern foundation systems, it talks about how they can mitigate soil creep. So I just wanted to make that clear that there was some evidence that had been introduced into the record. And then the second one was about stormwater, and I wanted to point out that in the submission by Bill Close on July 9th of this year, there was also an attachment by Branch Engineering dated July 8th of this year that was a direct response to Gunnar Schleider's issues that he brought up, and it was about 5 pages worth of it. They went into great detail about the issues about stormwater. So I just wanted to make it clear there was rebuttal evidence in the record on those two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move forward with the discussion, I just want a couple of items I want to bring up. One is, as you know, I wasn't here for the first deliberations. I was here for the prior hearing and final order that we issued before the remand. I have read all the materials in the record, and I watched the deliberation last Tuesday, the one I was not able to attend. So I also want to make sure, did everybody receive the final order via email, and have they had a chance to look at it? Okay, great. So I'm just going to pick up where we left off, and essentially, just as a reminder, the last meeting, there was a straw poll vote on the 3 items. On-site, off-site, and condition of approval number 10. And each of those was a vote of 4-1, 4 in favor, 1 opposing. So I'll just start the discussion tonight. We're here, as you know, to continue and look at the final order and present a motion. So in reviewing the final order, are there any comments, questions, or things you'd like to discuss? Okay. Well, okay, that was good. It's great. So, does anybody want, Commissioner Baker?
No, I just wanted to make a comment that this is one of the longer conditions of approval that we've had to review. And so it's quite complicated compared to what we're used to. So I appreciate the work that staff put into it. But there is the potential that there might be some quirks introduced, given the dimension of the final order. There might, by accident, have be something that was missed or, so I just wanted to mention that because of the size of this final order.
Okay. With that, is there anybody that would like to make a motion?
Well, I'll,
Commissioner Beeson?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is, well, you're asking if we want to make a motion, so I guess it wouldn't be premature. I'm, based on the discussion we had last time and the straw votes that we took, I guess I'd be ready to put a motion out there that we approve the amended final order for Capitol Hill PUD.
Great.
And I guess kind of put it out there as for discussion.
Okay, perfect. Is there anyone, and I'm assuming, just so we can get clarity and everybody online, the amended final order is what was sent to us that is sitting here today. It's final order of the Eugene Planning Commission on remand from the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, Capitol Hill PUD, PDT 17-1. And the date on this is
I guess it would be today.
13th day of August. Yeah, great. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion.
Well,
Commissioner Baker.
I just have a wording comment, just a suggestion. On page 7, the last paragraph. And, you know, I could have made more, but this one was an example of it. It says, based on the applicant's supplemental report and as discussed in the Public Works, I would just say, and the referral comments submitted by Public Works, rather than something about discussed in the memo. That's just a sort of a wording from my
Do you want
point.
to move to, right, so now this is in front of us because there's been a motion and a second.
Yeah.
So at this point, you could move to make that change and see if anyone wants to second that.
I mean, I think it's better that it's based on comments rather than a discussion. If you were trying, if you were advocating for this order, and that would be an example of the kind of wording things that I think would be valuable in
So
maybe
Commissioner.
presenting future appeals.
So Commissioner Baker, are you suggesting, as Emily Jerome has suggested, are you suggesting a friendly amendment that is modified and we can get,
Sure, I propose a friendly amendment that you were worded as I proposed.
Do you have any others of those that you
Yeah,
wanted to
so
point
maybe
out, so
let's-
we don't
No,
have
but
to
I think
do?
that was
That's a good
an
point.
example of, and I think it's better to not say discussion, because that doesn't imply that there was. Yeah,
I was
there's
gonna
another
say
one on
it's
page 8.
the same
that
paragraph, right?
Where it's discussion rather than just straight comments or, resolved by, the discussion implies that it's,
and what are you, can you be clear about what you're proposing? So you've been clear about not liking discussion, but for the friendly amendment, so that we're clear on what we're voting?
so supplemental report and the referral comments by Public Works. That would be the change.
So could we, I think what I'm hearing you say is you move that the sentence be revised to delete the words "as discussed in." And so it just reads, based on the applicant's May 14, 2019 supplemental report and the Public Works referral comments dated July 29.
That's another way of wording it, yeah.
That's simple.
Yep.
So is that your motion?
Yes.
Do you want the same on page 8 where it's
Yeah, I would do the same thing. Again,
the second?
the English definition of discussion doesn't,
Is there a second to that edit?
I'll second it.
Continue discussion. Commissioner Ramey.
Oh, and my question is simply, and I hate to put you on the spot, whoever wrote this, but why did you write it this way? Or is that person not here?
You know, I'm going to be honest that we're going to throw somebody under the bus who's not
Exactly, that's
here.
what I
But
thought you might
honestly,
do.
I will.
Just wanna be sure we're not missing
I think
some
it's something
legal
that Lauren
term or-
put
Yeah,
in, and
I'm guessing it was, and I could probably speak to it,
yeah,
being here in her stead.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
When I see that language, I'm not 100% familiar with everything in the record, but I understand the issues enough to know that it's my understanding that the Public Works referral comments actually did discuss that memo. And that the Public Works comments in and of themselves may not be evidence as much as, I'm not 100% sure, but it may have been intentional. I can also tell you that from a legal perspective, I have no concern with the language as it is or as revised. So,
Okay,
Okay,
that's what I was curious about. Thank you.
thank you. Any other question, comments, discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to take a vote. All those.
this is just on the amendment, just to be clear,
Okay,
whether or not you want to make this amendment.
okay. So let's take a vote on how many people support the amendment by Commissioner Baker, which is to remove as discussed on page 7 and page 8. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. Any further discussion on the larger amendment as amended? Okay,
Well, I could
yes,
I'll just make a
please.
blanket statement. This was a difficult and long-lasting process,
yeah, without a doubt.
and we're reminded once again about the limits of the processes that we find ourselves in, which is sometimes the decisions we're making are actually these incredibly finite decisions based on opinions from engineers that are not actually here to cross-examine. We're really looking at one opinion versus the other opinion. The issues themselves are very closely stated. So regardless of how we feel personally about the kind of development that's in front of us, our role is really to look at these individual, one step at a time kinds of decisions. And so I think sometimes people outside the room or outside the knowledge of this, watching perhaps at home, are very opposed to the idea of the development, but our job is really to look at this really sort of one very specific thing. And that's what we're doing, and we're doing the best we can to do that with what's in front of us. So I will be supporting the final order as written.
Thank you. That was nicely said. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, Commissioner Baker.
Just make a comment. I still think there's a potential for this to be appealed again because there can be concern about one of the conditions of approval, which was that there wasn't a review process for some of the subsequent geotechnical work that would need to be done. That would be PEPI and individual home sites. So I just want to mention that issue because that's one of my concerns again. You know, we're kind of in a continuous cycle here of dealing with this particular project. And I have a feeling that we may see this again.
Thank you. Okay, can I ask a quick question? Nick, I'm assuming this is just it's the edit version. So it's from the original and it's showing,
It's showing the revisions,
edit,
because
so-
when I turned it on, it
Okay.
showed the last.
okay. So essentially it's already what we're seeing here and the only two changes are the two changes that were done through the friendly
I
amendment.
believe it's you're seeing the changes from the one we had last.
The prior
meeting
one
that
to
were
this
made
Okay,
since
perfect.
that meeting. You're
Just wanted
seeing
to
those
clarify.
changes as well.
Great.
Plus what I just did.
Okay,
See, I crossed out as discussed in, and I did it on the other page.
perfect, thank you. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to take a vote. And the vote is how many in favor to approve? Do you want me to repeat it again, Emily?
You don't need to.
Okay.
To approve the final order placed before you as amended.
Yes. How many in favor? How many opposed? So that was 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, thank you. Are there any closing comments from staff in terms of the deliberations? Okay. Are you willing, yes, are you willing, I mean, staff doesn't necessarily have to stay. Would you be willing, do you want to stay for an agenda item B? So we can just get a quick update from staff and any kind of reports that Planning Commission might have that they want to share? Okay. Why don't we start with Planning Commission? So are there any subcommittee or liaison updates you want to give? Commissioner Baker.
The Historic Review Board met to discuss several issues. One, there's a small grant and loan, and there's a small loan program available for historic structures. There's a small grant program, and then there is also a revolving loan program. These were, the funds for these originally came from the 80s and was left over from a revolving loan fund that had several $100,000 in it that was used for loans to historic structures over the years. Unfortunately, the city's interest rate didn't drop down when other interest rates dropped, so that program came out of favor, and then those funds sat there for a while, and then they were reallocated back to the Historic Review Board. So they've been using it for small grants, which we've awarded several small grants. They're usually $1,000 to $3,000 for sort of more immediate repairs on older historic structures. So I wanted to mention that there is a program like that, because maybe people in the public aren't aware of it. And then we were looking at programming for the next biennium. The Historic Review Board generally receives a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office every 2 years for a certain amount of program. It has to be a match. Usually it's a 50-50 match. The city of Eugene matches the funding, so that the state will match the rest. And then these are small grants to maybe like $20,000 over a 2-year period. But I just wanted to report back on that. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Fragala.
I don't have anything to report. I would like to note that I believe we're going to look at our committee assignments again soon. And unfortunately, I have not been able to routinely attend the Human Rights Commission because of hearings or additional meetings that have been scheduled during that time. And when we discuss the committee assignments and liaison assignments, I would like to revisit that dilemma, because I know in the previous year, we had met on the same evenings, and then there was a change so that we could hopefully have a liaison, and it still has been a little bit challenging. So I hope to revisit that when we have our discussion next time.
Perfect. Thank you. So if there are no other,
I
Commissioner
can
Rainey?
try to summarize Sustainability Commission's work, and I think it's easier just to do it very, very briefly. They're still working on the Climate Action Plan 2.0. I think I mentioned this before, and the gap that exists between the goals that Climate Action Plan, I guess would be 1.0 had, and where we are currently. And sort of slopes of the lines aren't matching up. How we're doing versus what our goal is, the lines are diverging. They're getting further apart. So there was a whole series of strategies about how to bring those back together again, and they're looking at those. Electric vehicles is large in that. We're still working with large lever, what they call the large lever people like eWeb, University of Oregon, 4J, big users of energy, big influencers, LTD. In the fall, there may be food waste curbside pickup. And they also talked about being more involved with what they were calling an electric vehicle plan. I don't know what that is, but I think it has to do with the city developing strategies to encourage more use by electric vehicles. And then finally, there was some discussion about the plastics situation, the state passing the ban on straws and bags, but not extruded polystyrene. Would cups be included? And there's a city initiative coming now forward to city council to sort of close the gap between what Sustainability Commission thought was appropriate and what the state actually passed. So the city council is going to take up that soon, it says here.
Perfect.
That's my report.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, Commissioner Baker.
I was just going to say, prior to your involvement, I was involved there, and I think part of that electric thing was there was a proposal that's probably still sitting somewhere in this, that would require that new residential construction have a plug, I guess, in the garage
Okay.
or on the outside wall where the parking space would be for charging. So in other words, you would have new structures that are already
Right. Literally plug ready.
plug ready. So, and I don't know where that, I think it's probably the same place where some of these other things are, but yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a list of them in that category, kind of on hold.
Great. Okay, staff report.
Couple things. So your next meeting is an appeal public hearing on August 27th, and that is an appeal of an adjustment review, which is a planning director decision, but because this is classified as a major adjustment review, it's actually appealable to the Planning Commission. You haven't had one for a while. I'm not sure any of you, well, maybe two of you were involved in the last one. It's been a while. But it's a standard appeal that will be coming to you. And then I can't even remember the last meeting after that, but sometime in September we'll reconvene. I think it's like the 10th or something. I also wanted to let you know about 4 active LUBA appeals that are going on so that you can, not talk about them with anybody in the event they are remanded, similar to Capitol Hill. We're not anticipating that, but you never know what will happen with these. So that's the zone change, the Simon zone change that you all had here recently, and the Braywood PUD, the needed housing PUD. Both of those have been appealed to LUBA. Lombard, which were the Greenway and needed housing site review that was on Lower River Road. That is at Court of Appeals, I believe. And
Any day we should get.
okay, a ruling on that. And then the Furtick PUD, which is up off 30th and kind of Spring area, that's actually at the Oregon Supreme Court. So just, know that even though, even with Capitol Hill, even though you're done today, there's a final local decision, it can, move up the court system and come back to you until all appeals are exhausted. And so, just so you know.
Question mark, I had down, we had a planning commission on the 26th at 11.
Yeah, so that one got canceled. We did just send out, maybe late last week, I sent out an updated version that included that one being canceled.
Right, but you said now there's one on the 27th?
There's a public hearing on the 27th.
Okay, 5:30.
Yes. And it is over at Harris Hall.
And could you I'll look at the calendar, but I assume it's some ARA number?
It's ARB 19-1. It's the Eugene Broadway Apartments. It's proposed at Hilliard and Broadway.
So just so you know, it's on the calendar. You'll see it as, I will not be in attendance at that meeting either, so Tiffany,
Actually,
Commissioner
yeah.
Edwards will be chairing that. Hopefully she's here.
Yes, she is here. There are 3,
Yeah.
you won't be there. And actually, there's 3 of you, I think.
Yeah.
Commissioner Borowski is also gone, so.
I will be there.
Good. I hope 4 of you will be there. That would be really helpful.
Yeah. Stay well, stay healthy.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of, land usey planning related items going to council in the fall that may or may not result in things coming back to you. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. On the 9th at a work session, council is going to be discussing signs and specifically electronic message boards. You probably noticed in Springfield they do, and probably in the Salem area as well, they allow billboards and other signs that are actually electronic so they can flash, maybe not flash, but they rotate through more advertisements or messages. And so the council has been requested to take that up and take a look at that. So that's what they're going to be doing on the 9th. And then on the 16th, Emily and I will be returning to them about accessory dwellings. And so they had their hearing back in May on that particular remand. And the ordinance that is coming back to them, so the 16th is actually set for action. And they'll be reviewing an ordinance that removes the requirements for owner occupancy, for dog keeping, maximum occupancy of residence, maximum bedroom limitations, and then there's a prohibition of ADUs on new flag lots. And so all 5 of those are being, in the version that's going to the council, will be struck from that. And then in addition, in response to House Bill 2001, which now says owner occupancy and on-site parking are not reasonable regulations related to siting and design, we will also be including the removal of the parking requirement for ADUs as well. And that is all. Well, and just, I don't have an update for you on the rest of 2001. I can assure you that we've been putting our heads together a lot about what that is going to look like in terms of a process and what resources that's going to take and what of you we will need. So we'll keep you posted on that, and we'll be back once we have more definitive answers for you. So,
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, on the HR House Bill 2001, there were two components that needed to go into effect by January 1 of 2020. Sorry, is it?
well,
And then
so that's the owner. Yeah. So 2001 had a lot of things in it. The piece I'm talking about was just the piece related to accessory dwellings, and that's that cities can't require owner occupancy. I'm paraphrasing, but you can't require owner occupancy or on-site parking in association with ADUs.
So just those 2 are the ones that have to go into effect
Right.
in January.
Right. We have 3 years from January to implement the pieces about allowing duplexes on all residential lots and allowing the other middle housing types in areas zoned for single family.
So the changes you're making are just related to those 2?
Correct. Yep. It's just all about accessory dwellings.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from Planning Commission? Any other items from staff? Okay, then we will,
Actually, I got one more question.
Commissioner Baker.
There's more to our counselor here. I was just curious, I assume that there'll be issues that someone will appeal some of these House bills, and I'm just wondering if there have already been some appeals filed.
There haven't, and I actually don't foresee any. I mean, based on my communications with the major players in these things, for the most part, cities aside, the big players in this arena agreed on the provisions that the legislature finally approved. And so I think the compromise occurred in the drafting, and probably they won't be appealed.
Well, I guess it also could be that the first 2 issues aren't the concerns for a lot of communities. It's the subsequent 3-year.
Yeah,
So
I mean, what I anticipate.
maybe no one has bothered to appeal these first 2 because they're relatively minor.
Yeah, I mean, for some communities, the fact is when you read the statute, the number of communities that have to comply with various provisions
Varies
ends
by
up often
population.
being Eugene, Salem, and then a few other, in our range. Portland manages to have things not apply to them often. But I do expect that the rollout of the implementation will result in lots and lots of LUBA cases. I mean, even from our jurisdiction alone, it already has, so. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. Tonight's meeting is adjourned.